the last few years.
Those words don't go together.
They don't. I don't think that goes together. I don't know. We started, the CCD problems come about. It hit me, I guess, 2007, I believe, summer of 2007. I believe people started talking about it in 2006. It hit us 2007, and we probably lost we did lose half our colonies, I would say, between say August of 2007 and May, June time frame of 2008. We did build back. Things were going pretty well until summer of 2010. Say July, August 2010, and we were hit with another round of it. We didn't lose quite as many colonies then, percentage-wise, but we did lose quite a few, more than we would have liked to have. And then just the drought since then, really and truly, think about it, if you take out the summer of 2007, we've been in a pretty severe drought here in South Texas, and I guess pretty much across Texas since 2006. So we've been in about a 4 or 5 year drought if you take out the summer of 2007, where we had a tremendous amount of rain. And then again, we've seen quite a bit of rain last summer, not nearly as much, but the July, early August time frame, it was pretty wet too. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I do know that when you do have a really wet period like that, you see an increase in your small hive beetles, and I'm beginning to think that has quite a bit to do with CCD, because I know now, of course, we've just come through one of the most severe droughts that I've ever been in, and a lot of people say they have for the last 13 months. And the small hive beetle count is really low. I can't tell you when the last time I've seen some. I did see small hive beetles earlier in the year, April, May time frame, when the bees came back from California. But since then it's been awful dry, and it's not been a very good conditions for the small hive beetle to reproduce. So I don't know, maybe that has more to do with it than what we think. I don't know. I'm beginning to believe that. It just seems like when you have the real wet conditions and the large count hive beetles, we have a lot more trouble. So I don't know. Do you guys see any correlation between that? Is that
The beetles and the varroa, especially the beetles, are host to a lot of viruses, a lot of issues we have.
Yeah, he's thinking the beetles and the varroa host a lot of the viruses that we have. I agree with that. And that's another thing that kind of, talked to a lot of beekeepers the last couple of months, and they say their number of varroa mites are lower than they've been in quite a while. I know mine have been, we do sugar rolls with powdered sugar, and watch these hives not as closely as I need to, but I do try to do some every month just to have an idea of what's out there. And I would say since June, we had a little spike up in June, but since then very few varroa mites in my sugar rolls all summer and through the fall. So it is, I don't know, is it the heat and the drought helping us in that situation? I couldn't tell you. John?
Y'all have a useful technique for determining placebo level, and do you look at it along with the varroa and some of these other things?
No, I don't, John. I have, really the only time I've checked on those SEMA levels is when Paul Jackson took our samples for the survey that he's been doing, and we got those. And I tell you, I haven't treated for any kind of, I haven't treated for any kind of nosema in several years where I'm at. Now, we have used products such as Honeybee Healthy that they say, helps with that. So But again, I haven't used that product at all. Well, I may have used it back in January, February of this year, but I haven't used it in a long time. And our bees look as healthy right now as they've been in 2 or 3 years. The population is big. They
Did you get your results from the Texas survey?
yes, and the nosema level was very low. Of course, those were samples taken in September of 2010, and we had been using like a honeybee healthy product pretty much all summer of 2010. So,
You know of anyone else in Texas is monitoring nosema?
do you guys monitor nosema?
Nancy Keefe does. She tends to have a lot of nosema issues. She treats a lot.
Does he's saying Nancy Keefe over in Houston. Does she take samples and send them off to Beltsville?
She has some samples taken periodically.
Okay.
But she's also migratory, and I think she might have a lot of spores in her comb because it seems like it's a repetitive thing for her. So we've been fortunate not to have a lot of trouble.
Is what is she treating with? Do you know?
The
Fumigel. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if nobody knows what the key is. I believe it's probably a combination of all of the things that we talked about. So y'all want to add something to it?
One of the things that I would add, John and I did a lot of testing for about a year. We tested our hives pretty regularly for Nosema serrana, especially when it first came into the U.S. And we found something really interesting. We would test on a very regular basis, and we would test them 1 month, and we might have pretty high spore levels, and then we would do nothing, and we would test the next month, and we would have almost no spores whatsoever in our hives. And so there seemed to be a very wild fluctuation of spores, and sometimes our bees would be on the decline for an unknown reason, and we really wouldn't find any nosema spores. And then sometimes when the bees would be doing great, there really had a lot of nosema spores. So something we started doing in regards to nosema is we would just treat if we began to see a problem. And so if our bees started declining and we noticed that the spore count was rising along with that decline, then we would go ahead and try to treat them. So what we tend to do in our operation is we look for the symptoms, and if the symptoms start really showing up in a bad way, then we go ahead and treat. Other than that, we really don't treat. And we haven't had to treat in several years, and haven't noticed a major problem with not treating our bees for nosema.
Y'all go from California to tallow and back up Central Texas. Is that y'all's?
Yeah, well, we go from California to South Texas for Wahia, then we go to tallow in Houston, and then Dakotas to purple and crop. So our bees are constantly on the move, and so if we start to see that sudden decline, especially in fall, is when we have seen that decline that we attribute to Nosema serrana. It's usually in the fall. So if we start to see that loss, then we'll go ahead and treat them. But like I said, we haven't really had to do that in multiple years. So anything to add on?
But we do the same thing. We take the approach, we just look at the bees and see how their health appears. You can tell some of the nosema, as far as bees coming outside the hive, crawling around, there just appears to be a problem. Other than that, we haven't treated in several years. I have some fumigillin if I need it on hand, but we haven't used it. So we basically go by, we definitely try to stay on top of the varroa, which that seems to be the main key, is staying on top of your varroa. But we haven't had big issues with nosema. But Mr. Jackson is supposed to come test mine, so we'll see. I'm kind of curious to see where the spores actually are. But the problem with testing, I've noticed with other people that haven't tested, they'll have 50 hives tested in a yard of 100, and when they get the results back, one might be, half of them may be fine, and the other half may be marginal, or 45% marginal, and you might have 5% that are elevated. So it's not consistent when you have them tested. So if you send samples off, you can't get a good representation of your whole operation. So that makes it hard.
Yeah, it makes it very sensitive. So One thing I did want to add, we were just talking about beekeeping in general, as far as one thing, we've seen a big difference in our operation is that we have started trying to treat for varroa mites earlier, and we've tried to start feeding pollen substitute earlier and feeding earlier. Used to, the bees would be fine, we would start treating and feeding in, September, October, and the bees would do great. The last few years we've started giving them a sugar syrup, treating for mites, and doing pollen substitute as early as possible in the year. Almost as soon as we pull honey, immediately we give them the pollen substitute, immediately we give them syrup and treatment. And we've seen that make a pretty dramatic difference in our bees. We used to really struggle with getting our bees strong going into winter, but especially once we started feeding pollen substitute, usually starting in early September while there was even still a pollen flow, a natural pollen flow. We started seeing a really big difference in our hives by feeding them all the pollen substitute they could eat really early in the year. And that really has made a big difference in our hives, especially as they go to California. It's made a really big difference in their strength. I think some of Frank's research really points to the benefits of starting to feed that pollen substitute as early as possible in the year. And so that's something that I really tried to focus on, was getting on top of everything. A lot of people don't realize that, especially sometimes on a hobby level, once you pull that honey off of your hives, you've just taken away all of their honey, and you're going into a hot, dry winter. And if you don't feed those bees quickly, they're going to die out over the summer. So that's something we try to keep in mind even in a commercial operation, that once we pull that honey off the hives, they've got to have something, either go on to another honey crop or feeding them sugar syrup, but they have to have something almost as soon as we pull honey, in Texas anyway, or they're going to starve to death. So that's something that's really made a difference in our operation.
Blake, are you able to analyze your own samples of Nosema, or do you send them off to the lab?
Just send them off. Yeah, I mean, it's, for those of you who haven't seen, Randy Oliver has a really good step-by-step instruction manual on his website about how to test your own hives for Nosema. And it's pretty simple. It's just I haven't gone to the time and trouble of doing that yet. But yeah, if you are interested in treating, or looking at your own hives for Nosema, it's pretty simple to do if you have a microscope. So.
How do you test, Blake, for your varroa?
Yeah. For varroa, we do the sugar roll. Yeah, it seems to be the easiest, the cleanest, really accurate. While I'm standing here, something really interesting about the sugar roll that I didn't learn until last year. We would always do the sugar roll, shake up the bees a lot, and then shake the bees out of that jar to, or try to shake the varroa mites out of that jar. And I learned at one of the national conferences about a year or two ago that when you put your bees in the sugar roll and you coat them in that sugar, you're really supposed to let them sit in that jar about a minute before you ever start shaking. Because one of the main things that dislodges the mites from the bee is not just the powdered sugar, but it's also the heat that those bees generate as they're piled up on top of each other in that jar. And so one of the researchers told me that you should really get them all in the jar, coat them with sugar, let them sit for about a minute, then start shaking them up and try to shake those varroa mites out because they need to generate that heat, and that's one of the things that dislodges the bees, the mites from the bees. So that was news to me.
What percent of your crop, if you're getting an estimate on varroa in a yard of 30, what percent of those colonies do you sample, and is there a guideline as to which colonies you want to sample?
Usually I just usually sample pretty much at random. I like to sample about 10% of whatever's in that yard. And it's pretty much at random. I don't want to pick an incredibly weak hive. I want to pick a hive that's kind of an average. So I'll pick a hive that's an average strength for that yard. And then I'll pick about 10% of the hives at random and test them. And if I'm finding something that's if I'm finding both ends of the spectrum, then I'll do more testing. And if I find one hive with 3 varroa mites and the next one has 20, and then there's one with 10, then I'll do some more testing just to try to get a better average. But if I sample 3 or 4 and they've all got about 15 mites, I feel like I've got a pretty good average.
I do 10% also, John, basically what I look at.
You guys do something?
And I do mark them, and I like to go back and check those hives and follow them for a while and see what's going on.
So, John, do you have some?
You talk all we do about things, so I'm here for the ride. I'll talk about this.
Oh, you're up.
Oh, been out there trying to fulfill my responsibility as your secretary, getting the documentation lined up for this afternoon's meeting. So I missed a whole lot of Blake's presentation here, but I don't think you said anything about equipment, did you? Okay. We work together. He's the young guy, lifts all the boxes, and I do a lot of thinking. But one of the things that
That's why we're in trouble.
but by the way, when we do go to a yard to harvest honey, we got some other young guys there too. I make sure that I pick up one deep box full of honey and put it on a pallet so I can show them I can still do it. Now, when I can't lift that one up, I got to start thinking of something else to do. But one of the things we try to do in our operation is maintain quality equipment. You didn't say anything about that. Okay. We feel like that it's important for you to maintain good equipment for your bees to work in and out of. It's going to be a lot easier for you to move them when it comes time to move them. I think your bees will just do better if they've got good equipment. We start with, we don't really like to buy anybody's used equipment. We think you're buying somebody's problems when you do that. They're either going out of business because they couldn't stay in business, they did such a sorry job of operating, or they're going out of business because they got old and didn't have anybody to pass it on to. And usually in those situations, your equipment has deteriorated. There may be some disease in it and things like that. And the time you take old diseased equipment and rebuild it, you could have bought new stuff. So we start with new equipment, new unassembled boxes and that sort of stuff. And we treat it for wood deterioration. We do use copper naphthalate on it. We have used linseed oil, but that's slow, especially in the winter when you're trying to put most of your equipment together. We start with that, we build it, we paint it good, and we buy new assembled frames with plasticell foundation in it. And there's some good stuff out there. I'd like to encourage you to look at the wax that's on the foundation, make sure that they got a good coat on it. We found that the pieces of foundation that had the most wax got built out the quickest. The bees go to it a lot quicker if there's a good coat of wax on it. Anytime we reuse an old piece of foundation that has been cleaned, we put a coat of fresh beeswax on it. That stuff without any beeswax coating, they just sort of look at it and laugh at you. You expect me to build on that piece of wood? Put some wax on it, I'll enjoy it. So we do that. We run our stuff on pallets, on a 4-pallet opposite side type stuff. We are now painting our pallets, the side 2x on it with a color, and it helps us keep up with which ones have been worked on and cleaned. And we feel like when we're shipping them somewhere that if we're going to California, the beekeeper out there who's unloading them for it will appreciate good equipment with good painted pallets. Your orchard, your grower out there is going to appreciate good equipment. My personal opinion is that they're going to be a little more lenient with you if you've got good equipment, because it's like, this guy believes in quality stuff, he's probably sending me good bees. Now, you still got to have the bees in the box, but I think that they will be more tolerant if they feel going into the inspection saying, this yard looks nice, and I'm going to try to do it. You know, I'm going to look at them and they probably don't say they're going to be more lenient, but you know, if you're working with somebody and they put a good appearance up for you, you're going to say, these people care. So, yes, sir.
Do you strap your hives down to your pallet when you're going out to California?
We have not. We've got clips on the pallets, and we've not had any trouble that we know of. At least we don't see any trouble when it comes back. With
What size of hive do you run out there?
we run a double deep,
Double deep?
and
Do the growers prefer a double deep?
nobody's told us they didn't like what we sent. So I guess they prefer it. But generally, when our bees come back, they're clear to the top. You needed that double deep. You have a little more leeway before they go to the trees. And we like to get them back as soon as possible. As soon as that grower will turn loose of them, we want them on a truck coming back. And we try to get them, set them down, check them out, and split just as soon as possible. Now let me go back to going out there. We don't want our bees to go out any earlier than they have to. We want them to go straight to the orchard and be dropped off. I hear too many things from your big beekeepers who ship them out and leave them out there over the winter. These big congregation yards just are an invitation to disease and parasites. So we try to minimize the time they're away from Texas. And that's the way we talk to the grower or the beekeeper we're shipping them with. But we want to send good equipment, we want to send good bees, and we expect to have good bees coming back so that we can make splits from them. Blake and I do sell splits to a lot of the hobbyists up in our area. Those that we don't make up from buying brood from other people, we try to get out of our own. But we're still growing. And I probably wouldn't grow this much, but Blake here is Mr. Enthusiasm, and I get sort of pulled along with it. And yes, sir, John.
Does your upper deep, is that put on there for expansion, or is it pretty heavy honey? What's the status of that deep?
What's the status of it?
Yes, when it goes out.
Well, it's the deep we put on in the fall just as soon as we start feeding. And we want it to have honey in it, or, feed in it. And we want it to have bees in it too. Not full, room to grow. And it's going to be a brood box, if at all possible. Now, we're still growing. A lot of our honey supers end up on top and become brood boxes. And we're building boxes all the time. Ask the Mansker boys. They can make 100 deep boxes in a day. And we've got an assembly line set up. We have a steel jig that they plop those two pieces together, put glue in the joint, put it together, hit it. We have palm nailers. We use hot dip galvanized ring shank nails. Yes, sir.
You go from the lumber yard to...
No. We buy pre-cut pieces. My opinion is I want to be a beekeeper. I don't want to be a woodworker. And that's something we deal with in the class when we're getting brand new people. Oh, I want to build all my equipment. Well, which one do you want to do? You want to be a carpenter or a beekeeper? And about all the carpenter work we want to do is building pallets, both bee pallets and honey pallets. It's more fun for me to work with bees than it is to hammer nails. That's why I get Matthew and James to do it. But we do have an assembly line set up, and they use the palm nailers, one on each side of a long table, and flop that together, put the glue in there, run that row of 5 nails down each side, and stack them over here at the side, build a whole stack of those, and then start assembling. We have a jig for assembling to keep them square. We stack those up, let the glue cure a little while, some days, and then we dip and paint. It's worked well for us that way. We're would you say we're about 90% through of all of our old boxes we have? When Blake got started, he got some equipment out of Oklahoma. And you don't have to. Okay, it was not the best. So we are gradually replacing it. And hey, he got started. He soon found out you really don't want to do it that way. So, you know, you've got to learn these things one step at a time. But we believe in good equipment. We have just finished building a new bottling room. We had our bottling and our extracting room all in one spot. The health department really liked it. My engineering background says you use the best you can get, and I went with all stainless steel. We have reinforced fiberglass panels for the walls. It's air conditioned. I used to say I've air conditioned it just before I met Blake, because Levada don't like to work in hot rooms. But we did that. We've got real nice stainless tanks and bottling equipment. I was able to pick up stainless steel sinks. Go to restaurant surplus areas. Buy it used. Don't buy it new. The only thing we have that was bought new is an auger package that goes under the uncapper. Everything else was bought used, but it was quality stuff when we bought it. And we just added that bottling room, which is a 12 by 30 foot room that we have a 240 gallon milk tank in there as a main reservoir, a 500 pound date amp bottler, and a 300 pound max amp bottler. Right now we're doing all of our work through that. Several years ago I had bought an automated bottler, well, semi-automated, and we still haven't had time to put it into use. But that's the way we do it. We've got a lot of retail and reseller customers. Blake is building his base of customers. I've never had to go out and knock on somebody's door, ask them, can I sell honey in your place? And my belief is if you have a quality product, the word will get around and they'll start knocking on your door. We do sell at the state fair. You get a lot of publicity by being in that general store at the state fair. I can't emphasize that too much. This year there weren't many of us selling honey in there, but we did sell a lot of honey. Any other questions? It's time for me to move on.
John?
Yes, sir.
Are all of your boxes 10 frame, or do you ever use
All 10 frame. We set them up with in a brood box. It's 8 frames and division board feeder. Like I said earlier, we use the wood frames and the plasticell foundation. I can't remember who it was yesterday talked about the plastic frames. What they were talking about on those, most of the plastic frames have an opening up in the top bar and the bottom bar, and the beetles love it. And my problem before beetles came along with plastic frames was that it was those narrow tops, and the bees that I had didn't understand you're supposed to stop building when you hit that bar. They just kept going up and down, and you had a terrific job of popping the boxes apart. And if you'll pop them apart today and let the bees clean it out and pull the box tomorrow, you don't lose any honey. But if you're out there harvesting and you've got to pop them today and put them on a pallet, you're going to lose a fair amount of honey just in that burr comb between the frames. So we stay with the wood, and it's worked real well for us. We use probably 50% of our supers are deeps, and the other 50% are mediums. We like to use the mediums on stuff like Wahia or North Texas honey too. The Tala, the deeps work best, and they draw out a lot of your frames, so all the time you're building your supply of brood boxes. We do try to swap out our brood comb when it gets really dark, thick, because we're firm believers in the fact that whatever treatments you've been using are going to get into that wax. Your bees are going to pick up some pesticides out there just in their foraging activities, and knowing that the brood area, it should be as sterile as a hospital operating room, because that is the womb of the colony. So you need to provide as good an environment for your larvae to grow as possible. Yes, sir.
I'd like to discuss, open to the floor, the best way to exchange combs. As far as getting rid of the old ones, and the best way to introduce
Okay, well now,
foundation.
I'm going to answer that question like I do when people ask me, what is the best honey? The best honey to me
Your own way?
is whatever you like. The best honey for you is whatever you like. Okay, on exchanging frames, here's what we like to do. Now, you may modify this for your operation. We like to gradually move those darker frames to the outside. When we get them to the outside and get them empty in the fall, they go. But we usually change out most of those when we're going through the brood boxes that in the fall and winter before we start putting them back on making double Ds.
Then you introduce a foundation.
We introduce foundation in the honey supers. We do it a box at a time. I had the misfortune of deciding I'm going to put in a frame of wax, a frame of foundation, a frame of wax, foundation. And I don't know where it was that particular year or not, but I got some awfully fat combs and some really narrow comb too in the middle. And so we've had better luck if you just do a whole box at a time. Yeah. Now when we build up nooks, we'll start with 2 frames of brood and 1 frame of honey with them. And that's 3 frames. And we put 2 new frames in the nook box.
Foundation.
Foundation, yes. And what that does for us, the bees can grow, and the more bees they get in there, it gets those new bees something to do while they're building up, because we want to sell them about the end of April. And I've had some where I put all comb in there, and if you had a really, really good queen, those things be ready to swarm when you got ready to sell them. So we like to give them some expansion room, and it also helps us in doing our swapping out of our old comb.
I've noticed the best way to get new comb drawn is just like you said, put a whole box
Yeah.
on top of the brood box. And if anybody knows a way to get foundation drawn 1 comb at a time, please let me know, because every time I put a single foundation in the hive, I just basically make a gate, and they don't expand past that foundation.
Okay. All right, Rich, you got something you want to say about that?
Question, John.
Let me let Chris make his statement here first.
It's funny, you ask 10 different beekeepers 10 different things, they get 10 different answers. I've never been to their shop, even Todd's, but we have a lot of the same practices. I mean, we also use the same frames. Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
But we have a lot of the same practices as far as we like to introduce new frames every year. What we try to do is when we make our splits, we try to make a 4-frame split if we have that much brood to deal with. But we'll make that split.
4 frames of brood?
4 frames of brood. And then obviously honey and pollen to go with that. But we'll put the new frames on the outside of that. And that really helps eliminate a beetle problem. If you put extra drawn comb in there, it's harder for those bees to keep that clean. So, but as that takes off, we feed them a lot, and then they're on a natural flow, so they draw out those outside frames. And then when we go back and check, we'll rotate those frames. We'll take that brood nest, it's in the spring, and they're blowing up, we'll take that brood nest and we'll split it apart. We'll take that foundation that they started drawing on the outside and move it in the middle of the brood. And you're forcing them at that point to draw that out, because I'm after new brood comb, is what I'm after. So I'll take that frame, and hopefully, most of the time they've started drawing it out, and even if it has a little bit of honey, I'm not worried. I'll take it and drop it right in the middle of that brood, and I'm forcing that frame, I'm forcing the new frame into the brood nest.
That's a drawn comb, or at least they've started to draw it out, and when you split the brood in the middle of the brood box, it forces the queen to lay in that middle.
Right. We go back and check, and if she's laying good, and at that point, hopefully she'll have 3 or 4 frames of brood. We'll just take, we'll split the whole thing, and then we'll go, old frame, new frame, old frame, new frame, and get them all mixed up.
Have you done that in cool weather? I mean, does it make any difference?
I only do
Splitting the brood?
it in the spring. I wouldn't recommend it any other time unless you're going to do a lot of feeding.
Like an average, pretty warm, low temperature then, like.
Any foundation that I've ever put on, you have to put it on a good flow, on a strong honey flow. I mean, of course, we're in tallow country, so you can put just about anything on, and it's such a strong flow. If you've got bees in the box, they're going to draw it out. So you've got to have a real strong flow, or you have to feed them a lot of syrup so they can draw out that wax.
And just to add real quickly as far as exchanging combs, one other thing we do is during extracting time, we go through all of our combs and get rid of all the dark ones, and that's a real easy time to get rid of those old black combs, is when you're extracting, because they're already empty, they're already in the honey house. That's a great time to get rid of them. And then something else we've done as far as drawing out comb that tends to work really well, especially on a honey flow. If it's a stronger honey flow like the tallow, we'll put a medium super on our hives of drawn comb, and let the bees go ahead and fill up a medium super with honey, which they can do pretty quickly. And then we'll put a deep super of foundation between the brood box, and we'll move that medium super they've already started working on top. And usually our bees will draw out that deep foundation really, really quickly to get up to that super to keep working. And they've already got something above that foundation to go up to and work on, so it tends to draw them up into that deep super really fast. So that's another thing we do that tends to work really well to get them to draw out that comb as quickly as possible.
Do you recycle your dark comb, or do you just burn it?
Burn it.
Burn it.
Am I the only person that's weird enough to notice that my bees quit drawing comb when the vernal equinox comes? I mean, when the summer solstice comes?
I'd say
It's
yes.
the 21st of June every year for 5 years that I've been keeping bees. The 21st of June comes along and my bees go on strike as far as drawing out comb.
They have to be on a good flow. When you put foundation on there, they're going to fill every empty cell in that box before they draw that foundation. So they've got to be on a really strong flow. And it may just be at that point the flow trickles off.
It's just every year that I've been keeping bees, like it's just right around that 21st and the 25th of June. It's like they pack up their bags and quit drawing comb.
Works that way on tallow too, that's just about.
Sure, yeah. One thing I've done, started 2 years ago when we added new frames, is we have a lot of old comb and I'm trying to work through, but something I did, well, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, I had some friends that had some brood stolen out of their hives in California. So I decided, well, I'm going to mark my frames. Well, and this is nothing new. I had a guy that sent me some bees from North Dakota, and he had a stamp on there. So I thought, well, that's a good idea. I'll just stamp it on there. It's just a rubber stamp that you use permanent ink and you stamp it. And I thought, okay, I got the stamp. It just says more on there. But then I thought, well, I'm going to put the year. So it's only cost me like $36 to get a stamp that says more 2010. All those frames I buy in 2010, I stamp. So then 3 years from now, I know how old that frame is. Because if you put it in the brood nest, it's going to get dark relatively quick. And then when you're drawn out, you're not going to know if they all look similar, how old each frame is. So I've tried to do that each year, buy a new rubber stamp each year, stamp the frame. And you have to do it on a brand new frame, because once you put it in the hive, the bees kind of tend to wax coating over that wood, and then it won't hold that ink. But if you do it on a brand new frame, it holds good.
How long have you been doing that, Chris?
Since 10 is the first year. I've been doing it twice.
I just wonder how long you'll be able to see that.
Oh,
It gets
long
older.
time.
Yeah, long time.
I've thought about that.
It's like putting a coat of varnish over the top of that thing.
Yeah.
Really, so
Yeah.
you can see it a long time.
Yeah, and something else that we've done similar to that.
I
We
guess
have,
if you can't see it, it's time to throw it out.
and we've just taken a can of spray paint and done a different color for every year, and you just spray paint along the sides of the the top bars. Pretty quick and easy too.
Okay, Dick had a question over here. You done forgot, Dick?
It's mostly answered, but I was under the impression that you could move to the tower and make enough deep frames, drawn out frames every year to feed whatever else you need. Is that not true?
Well, you can do a lot of them. It's sort of however many you can afford to put on there. Now, this past year, they didn't draw out as good because even the tallow was a little bit slow. But, yeah, we'll put on 250, 300 new boxes, and they'll fill them out. Deeps, yes, sir. Because that's what keeps feeding our brood boxes as we grow.
That's what I thought you could do.
Yeah.
Feed your food, feed your starter, your splits and everything, all
Yeah.
of your tallow.
Well, that feeds next year's split.
Yeah, that's good.
But we also put new frames in with the splits that we do too. Straight in the brood box, and they fill them out just like Chris was talking about. It works good. We got any more questions before I pass it on to somebody else? Yes, sir.
Do y'all use the frame savers if you got a broke ear, or you just chunk that frame?
Frame safety, we use frame savers, or just throw it away?
Oh, yeah, I have a couple of boxes of frame savers, and it sort of depends on the day when they come up as to whether I use it or I chunk it, and that decision most of the time is made by the quality of the rest of the frame. Now, there is one drawback to all of that youthful exuberance we have when we get young guys to pull boxes. They also set them down as hard as they pick them up. And I've noticed in the last couple of years that we have more ears pop off. And it's not necessarily pulling the nail out or the staple out. It actually breaks that wood. Because I don't think they cut that wood with the right grains. It sort of curves up right at that ear, and we lose a lot that way. But if we can, we'll use a frame saver unless I'm not happy that day.
And another interesting thing, being a package producer, I shake a lot of my boxes, and the rare, very rare instance that I actually do break the top bar or an ear, it's usually the best, most beautiful comb brood in the hive. I don't know.
Bob,
Anybody else notice that?
Yeah, you triggered a reminder for me. We used 8 deep frames in boxes one year. That box will weigh nearly 100 pounds. And if you happen to set it down very hard, there's a high probability you're going to drop a bottom bar off, or it separates all of the honey and the top bar pops off. So we went back to 9 frames in our deeps. Now we do use 8 frames in the mediums on drawn comb, but you know, the good thing of having all of that honey in 8 frames is surpassed by every time you pull a top bar off and you lose that frame, and then you got to wrestle with it, getting it through the extractor and everything like that. So
I've heard of some guys when they break a top bar off the comb of honey, they'll just toss it out in the woods.
and let the bees work it,
Huh?
and let the bees work it.
Yeah.
I'm too tight. I won't say that. Huh?
I just heard that.
Yeah, that's about 7, 8 pounds of honey you're throwing out of there. All right. Who had a call?
Let me bring up, kind of switch gears while I see Steve there and anybody else. What about crazy ants, Steve? A few years back you were talking about that. Do you still have an experience with those? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we've probably lost another, actually 30 or 40 this year.
Really? Still having problems?
But we have moved away from them. We've turned down some really excellent locations just to get out of the area. And I don't think they're near as bad this year. And my thought is because of the drought. I can't think of any other reason. But yeah, they're still there.
Anybody else had any experience with them?
I've got some of those.
Have you?
Well, my old shop,
Yeah.
I'm transitioning between two shops. My old shop is on the east side of Houston, which happens to be right next to a landfill, which they showed up at that landfill many years ago. So they migrate right over to my shop because they love getting underneath all the lids and everything. We've cleaned up a lot to try to alleviate a lot of the crazy ants, but this year we haven't seen near as many either. And I think it is the drought. And typically, I think last year I didn't really see many until about July. I think they like the warmer weather, and then that's when they really, you start seeing a lot of them. But this year I haven't seen them. So I think the weather's helped us out in that aspect as far as the ants and the mice and the beetles. But we just couldn't raise more honey.
They have come up with some other products to kill them, but all the other products do still kill the bees. So you got to make your perimeter around the bee yard at least 12 to 18 foot from a beehive. Anytime a bee will land on it, it will kill the bee too. Some of the Stroop are testing some of that.
Next guy said, I don't care, he gets it in plastic. So,
Have you heard many studies, how they say that, I'm talking about plastic foundation. Some plastics get to a certain temperature, they might emit some plastic chemical. Has anybody done any studies about that? And if that's
I don't know of any studies that have been done on the plastic foundation. We probably would have to ask the Dadant and Man Lake and Peerco, because that'd be the first ones they'd go after. We like the plastic foundation because it's there, it's rigid, and, it's reusable if you need to. Wax foundation, wired wax foundation is great in the brood area, but my experience has been with the extracting equipment, it wants to come apart, especially that first year.
Brand new, deep, full of honey with wax foundation, you might as well just let it drip out.
But I thought you were going to lead into the question there. You had lead into people talking about the emitting of those chemicals from the jar that honey is in. You can get long-winded conversations about whether those plastics are helpful or not. I don't know of any research that really proved it gets into food, but I can't read everything.
I was just going to say that really interesting point. We have a lot of customers too that ask for glass versus plastic, and I'm sure everyone's has noticed that glass prices for honey jars are just going through the roof. And as a result, most of my customers aren't interested in paying higher prices for glass, but the ones that are, I still have them available if they want that. But I mean, 2 out of the 3 different glass jars that I started using have had about a 50% increase in the last year. And so with prices skyrocketing like that, it's just really hard to keep in glass, even though it gives it a higher quality appearance, and that probably is a little better for the honey. But with the prices like it is, I still give my customers the option as a store if they want to buy glass or plastic. But most of them just end up going with plastic these days since it's so much cheaper. Russell?
Do you reflect that change in price of the glass in the price of the honey that you sell at home?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, most of my customers are stores that sell it. They realize that glass is a value-added product these days. And so, some of them are more than willing to pay the price to get it, and a lot of them say no way. So it kind of depends on the store or the customer.
I have a lot more customers wanting honey in glass so they can give it as gifts.
Right, as a gift item, yeah, I guess on that as well.
Would the honey have enzymes in it to kill any contamination in the plastic?
I guess in theory, but I don't know, I can't speak to that. In theory, it could. What?
I was wondering if you, being a producer packer, have you come across any resistance with some of your customers from crystallized honey, or have you educated your customers?
Absolutely, a lot of resistance. They don't like it when it crystallizes. And usually what I do with all of my customers is I offer them an exchange program. You know, I'll tell them that, you know, if it crystallizes, for one thing, stop ordering so much so that it sits in your warehouse and crystallizes. Or sell more so it doesn't sit there and crystallize. But the few customers that I have that does crystallize on, I'll just trade it out with them next time I go and make a delivery. So I'll tell all my customers up front, look, if you have 2 jars crystallized, when you place your next order, call me and tell me I'll bring you 2 exchange jars. I'll reliquify them and resell them. But really, the vast majority of my customers have it down to where they'll order a small enough quantity so that it lasts them, you know, usually about 2 to 3 weeks, and they can sell it all in that time period, and then I'll redeliver. So, you know, most of them are pretty good about ordering the right quantities so that they don't have too much to granulate.
I'm wondering if we as an organization could maybe start an education campaign to maybe lighten that burden a little bit, to where we can educate people that honey's honey no matter what. It doesn't have to look like it was man-made.
They think it's
manufactured
yeah.
in a machine, because that's what
We,
they do.
Every jar of ours that we sell has that on the label about crystallization. I believe that's a very important thing. We tell anybody who brings up the question that honey is a supersaturated liquid looking for the opportunity to change state. And that when it goes from a liquid to the crystallization form, all it has done is proceed just like water goes to ice. All we have to do is warm it a little bit, and it goes back to the same liquid. And then we're very careful to tell them how to warm it. Don't put it in the microwave. Warm it gently. And I've got a whole 5-minute presentation on that. But those jars of honey that Blake and I pull back, because I do the same thing that he does. And I have a large upright deep freeze that doesn't work anymore. It's got 2 100-watt light bulbs in the bottom, and an old electric hot water heater thermostat up in the top. And those 2 things are plugged into. You can put it, unless it's really hard crystallization, you know, they've kept it for 6 months. You can put it in there, and overnight it's just as pretty as it was when it went out.
You know, just putting it out in the sun on a hot day.
Sunshine will take care of it.
Yeah, sunshine.
It takes it all over it, but it takes the sunshine to take care of it.
You take care of it. Yeah. You look at Blake's jar, and it says you can even set it in the window or in the car. But we do try to educate the consumer on that because there are some people that they see 3 crystals in there. Well, it's going bad. No, it's not going bad.
Well, do y'all know the genius who wanted to market bee honey as a pure liquid product? Y'all know when that started? I mean, surely maybe back in the 40s or 50s or 60s where it had to be crystal clear. And
I don't know who did that. I don't know what made the consumer do it. It had to be once we got into a more urban situation and fewer people who had their own bees.
You need to place the blame on somebody.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, so many countries.
You, Glenn.
John,
Yes.
what temperature does your deep freeze get to within 100 light?
We try to keep it below 130. But that's a real soft heat, and it does a great job.
I was just going to say, it is really interesting that so many other countries that you go to, granulated honey is very commonplace, just as commonplace as liquid honey. A lot of other places I've been to, it's almost more of the norm to have a granulated honey in a liquid honey. So it's
Yeah.
then
All of us are driving heat box. I put a jar on the dashboard and I get ready to go someplace. At least now.
Yeah, it works pretty good that way. What this, pardon?
Another good selling point on crystallized honey is you can tell your customers if it doesn't crystallize, it's not pure honey.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
That's what I.
We tell them that.
everything else.
And you're leading up to something I wanted to bring up. The consumer, I'm gonna be nice to them now. They're the least informed people out there. They will almost buy anything. And one of the things we really emphasize is read the label. And if it says honey blend, that means that it's syrup with a little honey in it. Because I don't know any beekeeper who really says this is blended honey when they're talking about you got honey from 2 or 3 different areas. But a honey blend or honey sauce is probably less than 25% honey. And those of you know that you can buy a truckload of honey and it's going to cost you, if it's light honey, it's going to cost you right now $1.70 a pound or $1.80 a pound, something in that range. You can get the darker honeys a little bit cheaper. But you're talking about say $1.70. You can probably go buy a truckload of syrup for 17 cents, 1/10 of the cost. They will sell that honey blend in the store for about 10% less than your jar of honey. But they got 90%, no, they got a lot more profit than that. Their cost is way down, like 15 or 20% of your cost. So you got 80% more. 80% of it goes as profit. We need to educate our consumer to read the label. If it says made with pure honey, it ain't honey. It's syrup. By the way, one of the things that we'll be working on this year is trying to get more of that stuff off the shelves. Texas has, we don't have a standard of identity of honey, but we do have some regulation in the Department of Health, if we can get them enforced, that says that if it is not pure honey, it can't be sold as honey. It cannot be in a jar that looks like a honey jar. It cannot have things on the label. It cannot have a bee on it. It cannot have the honey ladle, you know, the little dripping ladle on there. It cannot have a beehive on the label unless it is pure honey in that container. And it, according to the regulations, it is illegal to sell imitation honey. But y'all know you go to the store and it's right up there on the same shelf with it. It's not in the syrup area, it's on the honey shelf. And in this afternoon's business meeting, and I hope that every one of you will be there, we're going to have a resolution that calls for some work by the association to promote ethics and honesty in honey marketing. So we'll be working on that. You give time to quit?
A few more questions here.
A few more. We got some more questions? Yes, Chris.
How is the True Honey campaign coming out on the national level to extend this conversation?
I haven't had much information on that recently. I know that you're talking about the True Source.
Yeah.
That's where a group of beekeepers and honey packers are trying to develop the chain or the source of their honey so that it follows it all the way through. It's a truth in labeling type situation, and they're trying to get producers and packers to agree that they will know the chain that their honey came through all the way back to the producer. So maybe that'll get going good. Yeah.
That's making me think, I make a little bit of honey, and I pack a little bit of honey, I produce some, and I buy honey as well. I'm wondering if truth in labeling is going to go so far as to making it illegal for me to call the honey that I buy with my label on it, am I gonna have to change my label and say, this is not, I can't call it Weaver's honey because...
Yeah, you can call it Weaver's honey. All you have to do is say packed by Weaver. If you don't say produced, that's already on acceptable practice. The one we worry about is those who don't have any bees, and they have this line that they tell everybody how many bees they've got, and they don't have any bees. So, any more questions? Yes, sir.
What about our agriculture exemption on our bees? We got anything on that?
Agriculture exemption. Paul, you're talking about your...
Small time beekeepers there.
Are you talking about your land assessments, tax assessments on your land?
Yes.
Paul Jackson has an article on his website about where it is in the law and how you can get it. So he goes into great detail there, and he gives you every line in the Vernon's Code of where it is.
That was about time that gets approved.
Yep. Well, I think it's been around. He just now got it.
So I'm talking about the law.
Oh, yeah.
There.
That's
Okay.
right.
Talking about an ag exemption for your bees, you can go talk to your tax assessor, collector, tax assessor in my case. I've been exempt because of my bees for 30 years.
Yeah. And every county has its own assessor group, you know.
Appraisal district.
Appraisal district. That's right. And you have to educate the people in that appraisal district. I went years ago and got it on my property, the back part of the property. Of course, I couldn't get it on the house and property the house sat on. But I got it, and I've been able to maintain it because I showed that I was in business to sell honey. I had to have the land for my bees to work on, and they were agreeable. Now, I did not have the benefit of that information that Paul posted, but other people have gone into their counties and they just turn them down flat. Now, I know that with this information you should be able to do it. And speaking of taxes, I know we announced yesterday about the sales tax exemption. Beekeeping paraphernalia and that sort of stuff is specifically mentioned in the new regulations, where you have, if you want to get a agricultural exemption on items that you buy, you have to apply to the controller's department and show that you're doing that, and you can get a specific exemption for those things you buy for beekeeping. We didn't have it before. The only thing I'd ever seen in the opinions of the tax office was that jars for packaging honey were exempt from sales tax. Yes, sir.
What about raw honey? A lot of people want raw honey, only raw honey. And everybody's honey granulates, especially during the cold weather. How can you truthfully say that raw honey has been granulated?
Well, the definition we use, and I don't know what Todd uses, or Chris, is that we try not to heat that honey any higher than it just takes to get it liquid. And we tell them we have to warm it. You can't get it in the bottle at any time. You don't want to sit there 5 minutes waiting for that jar to fill up. But we have to warm it, and like I said before, when we liquefy it, we do it at about 120, 125, under 130. But you got people up in Vermont who are selling stuff they call really raw honey, and I wouldn't put that on my bread because it's full of bees' wings and everything else, comb, capping. So but you're going to have to talk to your consumer there quite a bit and say, we consider raw, and this is my opinion, we consider raw honey is not to have been heated up to 160 degrees, run through a high density filter, and then cool back down. And I also tell them that heating honey to 160 degrees, destroys 50% of the yeast in a 30-minute time frame. And most people who are looking for raw honey, they like you to use the word yeast because that's a natural product in honey. And you show them you know a little bit about it. You ought to read up on honey a little bit. Allison had a question first.
I've gotten a couple questions from people who are looking for crystallized honey. They don't seem to think it's good honey unless it is crystallized. So I think there's definitely a market for it if you don't want to go to the trouble of reliquefying it.
Well, yeah, it's.
People want crystallized honey.
I see it both ways. People ask for the raw honey, but they don't want the crystallization. They want it to be perfectly. Yeah, they want it to be perfectly liquid. I said, well, okay, you're asking for your cake. You know, you want the best of both worlds. It doesn't happen that way. If you want raw honey, this is what's going to happen. You know, and we do the same thing. We carefully warm it. We don't like to get it above 130, so it doesn't kill all the good enzymes, yeast in the honey. But it's a hard balance, and that's what I usually look for when if I have to go somewhere to buy honey. People are always asking me, why are you doing this? I said, well, I'm looking to see if it's starting to granulate because I know that's real honey. So, but it's just educating your customers.
You can also, if they don't want to eat the granulated honey, you can tell them it's an excellent exfoliant.
Oh, there's a marketer there.
If I had enough energy, I'd repackage it and sell 4 ounces of honey for $35.
Yeah, I have one grocery store in East Dallas. Those of you who don't know it, East Dallas is sort of well, the old word we used to be was yuppie. You got a lot of upscale young people who are wanting to buy food as close to the producer as they can, or like that. This is an Italian grocery store. They specialize in Italian foods, a lot of them from Italy and all like that, but they buy our honey. And I went in one day and I said, you hadn't ordered in a while, have you got a bunch of granulated? He said, oh yeah, but that's all right, they like it that way. So we never bring any honey back from him. But now over in Highland Park, where they make a lot more money than all of us put together here, they don't want any granulation in their honey there. So we try to keep their stock just what flows through quickly. Now once they get it home, they're okay with it. They don't bring it back. But they don't want to buy it if it has any granulation in it. I ended up here with a microphone all the time. How did I get so unlucky?
You're long here. I don't want any.
Yes, sir, Dwayne.
The little yellow stickers, if you find, I don't know what to do with the granulates, especially in warm water, that's well worth the money to put those little stickers on each and every garden set.
What's that sticker say?
The little yellow stickers, I do, brush them out and got them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is raw honey.
The granulation.
The granulation label. Yeah, we get ours. We like it so well. We have ours printed up, and now they're have the barcode on top of it. So we try to do that to keep from having to have an extra sticker. Maybe sometime we ought to have a meeting on just what should be on your label. That would be important. So, Latham, we ought to have that next year's meeting.
Speaking of that, is it not illegal to sell honey without a sticker on it?
The health department says every jar of honey that's sold has to be labeled with the producer or packer's name, and they have a whole set of information on that. And you also have to have a food manufacturer's license. Now they're not going to come after the hobbyists who's selling just a few jars and things like that, but if it's sitting on a store shelf, they're going to want you to have that food manufacturer's license.
I think there's an exemption if you sell less than $5,000 worth of honey per year.
That exemption only applies to, and it's $25,000 worth of that particular product. That exemption applies to the nutrition label and just the nutrition label. The State Department of Health doesn't give you that leeway. At least they've not given it to us when we talk about it.
Yeah, according to the state health department, if you sell a jar of honey, period, you're supposed to have a food manufacturer's license. It's supposed to be labeled with all their guidelines. You know, like John said, they're probably not going to come out after you if you just sell a few, but legally, if you sell honey, period, then it's supposed to meet all of their standards and guidelines. There really is no bottom line on that, unfortunately. So.
You may be referring to the new food safety law on the national level. There is an exemption there for certain small bakers and things like that. But I don't remember seeing anything in there that applies to honey producers or honey packers. And by the way, those of you who use grandkids and things like that in your operation, you actually pay them. You need to go out to the U.S. Department of Labor and see what they've got a comment time right now. There's going to be some new labor regulations come out that may severely restrict how you can use your, well, who you can hire to work for you. The bee industry is really concerned about that.